Welcome to the Wellness Rebel Show, where you reclaim your health and tap into your body's healing power. I'm your host, Fatima, here to empower you with the knowledge and tools to take charge of your well-being. Whether you want to boost energy, improve mindset, or unlock vitality, this is your go-to source for practical advice and inspiration. It's time to step into your power and live a life of health and freedom. Welcome to the revolution. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wellness Rebel Show. Today I have Eric Ritter. He's Eric Everything Led on Instagram, and I'm very excited to have him on to talk all things lead. Hey Eric, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on today. I'm excited to talk about lead, as always.
So why don't you tell us about why you got into, like doing all this? Like what was the catalyst for this being like an investigative journalist? I'll just call you that.
I would use that
For
term very
lead.
loosely. Yeah, more like a gonzo journalist, to be honest, because the story really is unfolding through chemistry. Lead is a thing that I never thought too much of. Even when I started making lead testing kits in 2019, I never really considered that it was a real problem. I don't know, it just didn't seem apparent. Like I didn't think about it. But I had identified that there was this product called Lead Check being sold for $5 per test. And it had apparently been engineered specifically so it could be patented because the chemical testing technology was like freely accessible the whole time. Anyway, so I made a much cheaper version. And then over the years, I found that most of the people who wound up buying that test on Amazon did so because their child tested positive for lead first, and then they were looking for the source second. And so when this new glowing lead test method came across my desk, I decided that this was a way to reach people proactively instead of waiting for somebody to get hurt before you find the lead in your house, which just
Yeah,
seems like a better choice.
I know. So, can you tell us about some common, well, let's start with the common sources for lead. Like, where do we usually find these exposures from?
Oops. Definitely in your house. Lead paint is the number one source. Lead-based paint was banned in 1978 in residential structures. So if your house was built before 1978, you could have lead in it. The age of your home is also inversely correlated with the likelihood the home has lead. So if you have a very old home, you have a very high chance of having lead in there. Old windows are especially hazardous, or if your deck, let's say, is painted, any surface that gets friction is going to create lead dust, and then it's really the dust that gets
Yeah.
into your body. So another way that dust can get into your body is if you track it in from outside, or if you inhale dust outside. Soil contains a pretty big reservoir of lead. In the mid 1900s, a lot of lead gas was burned,
Uh-huh.
and it was only like 2 grams of lead per gallon, but there was like hundreds of millions of gallons burned per day, I think, in the 70s. So a lot of that lead is now still in the environment. I mean, it really doesn't go anywhere. It's like really stays where it's at. Lead oxide in the soil can be digested by the hydrochloric acid in our stomachs, giving us exposure through that route. The other big one is probably water. If your water service line has lead, or if you have lead solder in the pipes in your home, or even if the inside of your faucet has leaded brass components and the water quality is such that it allows that lead to go into the water, you could be exposed through any of those vectors as well. But the lead water line is 1988 is the cutoff for that. So if your house is built like in the 90s, probably pretty good on lead. All of the fixtures could have higher levels of lead than is allowed today. Same for the paint. The paint was reduced from 600 ppm to 90 ppm in 2008, and in 2014, the copper or the leaded brass went some. I don't remember that one. Went from.
Yeah.
It's still too high. It's still too high. I think they just
Uh-huh.
finalized a new rule. They're always updating these rules, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a whole thing.
But yeah, it's kind of frustrating with the faucets, especially when you're like, it's lead free, but then when you read like the fine print, it's like it can still contain lead.
Yeah, the term lead free is like it's just a made up term, and it's not like
Yeah.
alcohol free. Like if you say something's alcohol free, beer, let's say, like there could still be only a very small amount of it versus the amount that would like affect you, I guess. I'm trying to
Yeah.
imagine it as. Whereas the lead, it's still significant amounts. Still like 2,500 ppm lead is allowed in brass today. which depending on its application could expose you for sure. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I've never done extensive leaching studies, but more, I'm going towards the lead singularity. So there's all this chaotic, ongoing projects that are getting close to completion. And when they all do, they'll all be in one place at one time. It'll be great. There'll be no more lead poisoning at that point.
That sounds amazing because I see a lot of moms, in mom groups where they're like, "Oh, my kid tested like their lead level is so high in their blood." And so does that mean, right, like on the blood, you can only catch lead when it's like the acute exposure? And what's the time frame, like the window of number of days that the lead stays in the blood?
Great question. Definitely going to vary based on your diet. I honestly don't know which is because there's like all these unanswerable questions that you have to answer with like actual science instead of just speculation. But basically, the body thinks that lead is calcium, so it tries to hold on to it.
Yeah.
It'll put that calcium where calcium goes, which is your bones or your nervous system, or the like micronutrient necessity of calcium, the really micro one, which is enzyme function. So if you have elevated lead to a high enough degree, the mitochondria's ability to make these enzymes that take oxygen and turn like sugar into ATP will mess up that electron transport chain, leaking electrons and making free radicals in the cell, basically. So that's how you get like inflammation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably all the time is probably a big cause of inflammation generally, but insofar as the lead is concerned, when that happens in the nervous system, you get like neuron death from that, and that's how you really lose a lot of IQ points. But the ADHD effects of lead are explainable by the fact that calcium is used to transmit signals in our brains.
Mhm.
Calcium gated ion channels are like the way the neurons communicate. So if there's lead involved, it's like, you got a lot of people calling a lot of other people, but then some of those people just have lead poisoning. So whatever they say is going to be like a little bit different than what it would have been otherwise, I guess. I don't know how to
Yeah.
put that,
Yeah.
but you don't want to get lead in the calcium gated ion channels because it messes them up. It doesn't act
Yeah.
normal and it makes you have ADHD basically, or it makes you have high blood pressure, which is like the ADHD of your vasoconstrictive
Yeah. Yeah.
smooth muscle. I don't even know how it works.
Right. Her body is so complicated, but also amazing at the same time. And there's still so much that we need to learn, really. But yeah, I totally believe that, I know that lead has the affinity for bones and um, where
Yes,
calcium, like, it's like a replacement part for calcium.
very close to it, yeah.
Yeah.
And so insofar as your question is concerned, the child's need for calcium on a day-to-day basis will determine largely their clearance of lead from the blood because the body doesn't want to give away calcium. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't want to give away lead either. It's valuable. So we only excrete it when it's like necessary to be excreted. I don't know if that's through the lymphatic system or how it works, but we don't let go of it lightly. Basically, if you don't do chelation on the child, it will depend on like how much calcium they're like absorbing that day, which I don't know if
Yeah.
it's good or bad because the half-life of lead in the brain is 2.5 years. But the rate, I don't know what the rate of uptake into the brain is versus the bones. And if you gave a calcium depleted diet, what would get preferential absorption? Would it go to the bones? Could you target that? Could you give some kind of like
Yeah.
brain nasal spray for calcium? I don't know. This is
Yeah.
another topic. The detoxification topic, I basically started and stopped at modified citrus pectin, which is a heat
Yeah.
partially digested form of pectin that
Hmm.
will scrub lead from your blood if you get it into your
Yeah.
blood. And so if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
break it down with heat and acid enough, it'll be small enough to get into your blood, increasing urine lead output by 5 times. So I think
Okay.
that's pretty significant. So
Yeah.
it'll do that with all the heavy metals, actually. There was previously a patent on this, and not much work has been done, but I've secured 500 1 month, 15 gram per day courses of this material,
Yeah.
and it was like 20K. It's not even cheap. It's insane because it
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
specially modified. So my plan was to like give them away to people in exchange for just their blood leads before and after and see
Uh-huh.
see what that gives me. Or I may do this through a more official route of an institution where there's children or adults who have lead poisoning. Which,
Yeah. Yeah.
but as just a population study, I would just be curious what, people could get tested too, basically, for the cost of
Right?
this. Is it still free? I
Yeah.
don't know.
So basically, but when you said heat, so basically you kind of have to do it with like in conjunction with like near infrared sauna or something like that
I was
to
just
break it
referring
down.
to the way that the
Or
modified citrus pectin
oh,
is
okay,
prepared.
okay,
They
okay,
mix like an acid in there and then just heat it up to like a soup basically, and then it makes these long chains of pectin shorter. And
yeah,
when they're short
okay,
enough or small enough, they can just go through your intestinal wall into your blood, and that's where they exert
okay,
the chelation effect, if you want to call it that. But the
yeah.
FDA will tell me not to call it that eventually. But
But so
you
does
know,
it also work? Because I've heard of modified pectosol, basically, right?
yeah, yeah.
Pectosol, same thing.
Pectosol is the brand name.
Yeah, yeah. So it works as a binder as well. That's a binder, right?
I guess you could call it
Does it?
that. It has an affinity for lead, and then it
Yeah.
itself gets removed over time, and the body wants to remove that. So it's basically like a net for lead, and then
Hmm.
the whole net gets thrown away in the urine.
Well, that's good to know I've been, because I don't know if I mentioned to you, I'm a mineral balancing practitioner, but I've been kind of hesitant to use binders because I was just thinking like, oh, all the fiber from all the vegetables will bind anything that's released when you're giving them, replenishing the minerals to push out the heavy metals. But I
Okay.
know that like Pectosol is highly recommended, and I know that I'm kind of worried about zeolite. What's your take on zeolites?
I was just going to say something, but because I would love to come back here. If you have all these products, will you send me them all? And I'll just completely tear them apart because most of these are it's just misappropriation of technology. Like, I don't think
Yeah,
zeolites get into your blood. I don't think that,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like taking activated charcoal. Like, it's not going to take out what you've already absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
Zeolites
Yeah.
probably would have, but they don't work. The thing is about solid phase extraction, which is basically what we're doing with the modified citrus pectin or the zeolites or whatever kind of binder there could be.
Uh-huh.
It's taking the lead from a liquid, attracting it to a solid, and then we remove that solid. So zeolites have to be where they do their effects. So if they're not in your blood, they're not helping you. And I don't think that I feel comfortable ingesting. I don't even think it's possible. I think it would cause serious damage to the interior of your circulatory system if you ingested zeolite particles, which are like mineral things with
Uh,
shapes that attract
yeah.
elements to the surface. But the thing is, they only work under specific pH conditions. And the stomach is a very low pH. So when you're doing solid phase extraction, typically you elute or you wash off the analyte from the solid in acidic conditions. So the stomach would be like the part where it doesn't absorb it. Like if I took
Uh-huh.
activated charcoal and tried to absorb lead in my stomach, it probably wouldn't absorb it.
Yeah.
And then when lead, this is just a random tidbit, goes into your small intestine, that's when you don't absorb any more of it because it's so basic in there that the lead becomes insoluble.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
But
good way for
does
people to
it?
protect, sorry, can I
Yeah. Go
keep
ahead.
going? This is great
Yeah. Yeah.
info.
Yeah. Yeah.
If a good way for people to protect themselves from lead that's in their environment, like paint or if you have soil, is to spray a solution of sodium triphosphate onto the surface. This will convert the lead in most forms into lead phosphate, which is also insoluble in your stomach acid. So hydrochloric acid won't break down that lead phosphate, so you won't absorb it. And then when it goes to your small intestine, it's now non-absorbable anyway. Lead singularity is coming. Once people have all this knowledge, they can't be harmed by it. That's what my opinion is. Like nobody's
Yeah.
getting poison ivy when you can see the poison ivy.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
when you can't see it, like, and you don't know the danger is there. It's like I didn't know the danger was there when I dropped down and landed on my tailbone and then passed out the other day.
Yeah.
If I did, I would have never done that. So
What were you doing it for fun? I'm just kidding.
I was trying to make a video about how I was suspicious of potentially BPAs because I've been exposed. If these what do you call them, like packaging receipts or those thermal
Hmm.
printing
Yeah.
labels,
Yeah. Yeah.
apparently bisphenol A or BPA is used as a developing agent to make that black barcode print out when you heat up the dye underneath. I don't even know how it works. It's crazy. But I've printed so many labels since I've been selling
Yeah.
those lead tests in 2019. I also was selling smelling salts around the same time, and I just printed so many labels and put them onto
Yeah.
so many different things for the past years. So anyway, I was making a video about this, and my car was packed. I was gonna make a video of the car trunk closing and me talking in front of it. But I wanted to block my license plate, so I figured I'll film myself like hanging from this pull-up bar. So then I switched my hands around, and then I just was messing around, and then I decided to do like a kind of a fake muscle up. But I leaned forward to avoid that thing. Like it's like shaped like this, literally, but it's so hard. It's harder than this, if you can believe it. And then I muscle up, and then I just go to drop down, I guess to be cool for the camera, and then I just landed on my tailbone, and it just was so shocking that I went into shock and I fell unconscious. And I had a
Yeah.
straight near-death experience. It was sick. I actually would recommend that because it was pretty fun. But if you don't get actually hurt, I went blind. I couldn't hear right. It was so insane.
It's so crazy.
Anyway, I wouldn't do good in war. I probably would become unconscious if my arm got blown off. I think I would pass out. It's called a vasovagal response or something.
We're gonna have to look that up.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
I
sorry
need
that
some.
I'm laughing.
No, now I'm in pain when I just moved and it hurt. So I have a bruised
Oh,
elbow. But anyway,
that is not fun.
so I don't know about the BPAs. What is your opinion on BPAs? Do you have any
I,
insights into that?
I honestly avoid BPA exposure myself. When I go to stores, I always decline the receipts because even though they do get released in our urine, like they kind of have a
Okay,
short half life, they say, but then there would still be some that accumulates in your body, and they like to, if your liver is already overloaded, then it gets stored in the fat, and then that's what they're like an obesogen, basically, is what they're called.
really?
They're considered an obesogen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've been gaining weight ever since Halloween.
Maybe it's the BPA.
It may be, but my BPA consumption, I mean, it went up around the Haya bottle thing.
Uh huh.
I feel everybody owes me their Haya bottles though, because they took 1,400 units, but I only got 5 bottles out of it, and they all got 75% off. And they said that they were doing it to test their Haya bottles. So it's like, is Haya just like not actually dangerous, or is this something else? I don't know.
Yeah, I heard about that Haya. Everyone. So is it just the Haya bottle that's high in lead, or is it also the actual little supplements for kids in there?
I think it was just some of the bottles. Like bottles from
Okay.
2023 at some point had
Yeah.
some lead paint on the outside. The lady
Yeah.
whose kid scraped it off with her teeth said that the kid's blood lead was below 2 when they tested it. But this happened 8 months ago. So to
Okay.
our conversation from earlier,
Yeah.
that blood lead's gone. Some
Hmm.
of it's in the bones, some of it may be
Yep.
in her hair, some of it may be in her nails for like a lag period. And
Yep.
then, but however much went into the brain, like, does it have a 2-year half-life or whatever? It was 2.5 years,
Right.
something like that.
Right.
I don't know. And that's like really crazy because science isn't there to detect how much lead is in somebody's brain. That would be really like mint if they could do that,
Right. Yeah.
because that would really enlighten us all to how much danger is there per day when you have an elevated blood lead as a child or an adult. And I think that's like just part of the information that we need to make an informed decision about how we contextualize the exposure and what we do about it. I think how much we panic or should panic as a society to make the problem go away.
Yeah.
If they can wait a couple of months, then like no stress. But everybody I met wants to take immediate action. So I think that it's probably better to err on the side of urgency here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like they might be able to, but they just not letting us know that they can, or unless they have to really open up our brains and like really look in there. So we never
It
know.
may be a post-mortem situation, but there
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
in Maine, which is one of these people who she would love to talk to you more about lead if you wanted to switch this to like a lead-based environment. But anyway, she's a doctor from Maine. She said that there was this mass shooter in Maine, and the
Uh-huh.
biggest mass shooter in Maine history. He worked at a shooting range, and he almost certainly had severe lead exposure, and they actually have
Yeah.
his brain saved because they believed it was CTE from concussive blasts going off. He was also in the military or something, so.
Uh-huh.
But the military was like, those concussive blasts don't cause CTE. But it's possible. They found like fibers and tangles in his brain. I think that those are kind of related to the inflammation, and it's a way to like flush inflammation or do something. I don't know. But you could have more inflammation from also lead exposure and like very mild concussive forces to the brain. I
Yeah.
would imagine if you had some kind of brain injury that added lead would make more inflammation happen, and that is not good. I guess we want to minimize inflammation in our brains. Is that
Yeah, yeah,
like the
definitely.
contemporary wisdom? Okay.
I would think so. Like, because you know how, yeah, we have the blood-brain barrier, and it's not only lead, right? Like, there's other heavy metals that gets into our brain that causes all this inflammation, and I think that's what's kind of also making people, sick. Like, all the mental health issues, all the
Yeah.
degenerative health issues.
What's interesting is that lead exposure shows a logarithmic relationship with IQ loss. So the first
Hmm.
like first three, they use this denotation, which I think is misleading, and I'll tell you why. They call it micrograms per deciliter of lead in your blood. But what that really is, so right now, like the threshold level, which is the level that 2.5, the worst poison 2.5% of American children are above 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. There's this whole thing about closer to zero. Well, they're only at 3.5, right? Wrong. It's actually 35 parts per billion
Hmm.
is 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. So by using this like single digit notation strategy, you make it seem like the problem's already gone. But the biggest effects IQ wise are already have happened generally by 3.5, which is like 5 to 7 IQ points. But basically, the point I'm making was I can't really remember actually. If you could steer me in
I
the right direction, I guarantee I could take this home.
maybe you were gonna talk about the increase or decrease of the IQ levels throughout the years.
Yes. It was not just that, it was actually targeted to what you had said about the mental health implications.
Yeah.
And so we know that lead is like semi-associated with like disinhibition and aggression, and
Hmm.
the IQ loss doesn't help that. But who knows how sensitive the human mind is to the effects of lead in a
Yeah.
cognitive sense. And so all these people that were exposed at a level of 170 parts per billion lead in their blood, which would be a level of lead that I wouldn't drink in the water today,
Hmm.
like not by
Yeah.
a long shot. If you drank 1 liter of water at 170 parts per billion, you consume 170 micrograms of lead, which adults aren't supposed to consume more than 7.7, and children aren't supposed to consume more than 2.2. So this is a ridiculous amount of lead in people's blood, which seems like
Yeah.
it should be like lower or as low as water. I don't know, but it really does build up. So if you consume a lot of it, it's
Yeah.
not good. People in the past consumed a lot more. The effects that they must have gotten at the societal level, I think we're experiencing that now with just the way everything goes. And, I saw this person on the road the other day trying to make a left across the lanes in front of me, like a normal activity. He has his blinker on. He's doing nothing wrong. This person honks and drives around him. This guy immediately flips him off. It was like he was in a old West shootout, and he drew it and fired it immediately. He wasn't even thinking. It was insane. And so I'm like, what's this going on? This guy must have lead poisoning to react like this. Like, why would you react so aggressively against a driver who's like clearly in the wrong? The best part about drivers on the road is when they do aggressive stuff. I'm like, I'm not in the wrong. I'm like laughing hysterically because I don't know
Yeah.
what they're
Yeah.
getting upset about. They're acting crazy.
Yeah.
So even car deaths are associated with lead exposure. Everything has to be associated with lead exposure because it went into everybody's brains and it definitely caused issues. And now today, it's like less of this mass poisoning and more of potentially finding out your child has lead, and then the CDC is calling. That lady from
Hmm.
Maine, she's the doctor. The CDC came and they found her house was built in 2003, and it was found on the base of her home. It was sprayed in the beds. It was sprayed on concrete. It was a sealant from
Okay.
the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Crazy. So they really could come in, and her kid had an elevated level. The CDC showed up at her house.
Yeah.
So it really is wild today. And when you get lead poisoning today and you're the only one who got it, it's way worse. Because when everybody's got the lead curve memo, nobody's paying attention and everybody's getting that question wrong. So it's easier to have lead poisoning when everybody else is also similarly affected. But if I'm the only person who's short 5 or 10 IQ points potentially,
Yeah.
I'm in the back of the class.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's why it's so important because lead is bad.
I know. And I don't know if maybe you know her. Do you know Lead Safe Mama? She's very controversial right now, right?
Yeah, she's controversial to me because she owes me so
Yeah.
much money. She owes me
Oh.
$120,000, a little bit more, I think.
Oh my gosh.
And she's not responding to my my legal threats, basically, is what I'm sending her. But she's just ignoring them, like I'm never gonna do anything. But I think that she has experienced lead in the worst way and has got so
Mm-hmm.
traumatized by it that she continues to spread this narrative that's one of like kind of like a almost like a PTSD type narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the information that she's putting out is just not contextualized properly and kind of to make people return to the website, let's
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
or buy more expensive services in a confined space. My relationship with her deteriorated when I questioned whether that model was particularly suited to end lead poisoning on a massive
Mm-hmm.
scale, which is my
Yeah.
goal. So when I got resistance from that, her husband said that it sounded like it was an interrogation. And I was like, well, couldn't any conversation become an interrogation if you just don't answer any questions?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting one on that one, but we'll have to see how it goes. So yeah, I'm familiar with her stuff, but she's the one who got me so radicalized, honestly, because I was trying to get
Okay.
her to do this for me.
Uh-huh.
Like I didn't want to talk about lead. I didn't even use social media for 10 years before this because it's so addictive. I don't need social media. I might as well be doing any kind of other insane activity that's highly addictive, you know. But social media is like an RPG. Like you wind up spending. You ever play an RPG before?
No, I've seen
Okay, well,
people that do, and they like spend until like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and they don't sleep.
no, and all day on
Yeah.
Saturday. I used to be
Yeah.
so addicted to playing RuneScape. I chopped so much wood in that game. I did so many repetitive behaviors. I don't even know how that didn't spawn like machine learning to like automate all human tasks because I'm literally just doing like the work of like a person who could have been harvesting wood with a robot. And I really believe that is coming soon. And that's going to be the big, it's not AI, it's just people whose labor cost is so low, but they're connected to the same internet that now we can have them working in our environments. Like cleaning the dishes for 25 cents. That would seem like a pretty good job, though. If that's double the hourly wage that I would make in like somewhere in India with a high-speed internet connection, I would definitely take that job. And I would definitely pay 25 cents for my dishes. I would pay up to $1 for my dishes to be cleaned out of the sink. That's easily worth $10. What am I talking about? That's a great
Right.
deal, right?
Right.
So I think
Right.
that's coming, but that's neither here nor there.
I guess I should. I've been so like hesitant to pay my kid to do the dishes. I guess I should pay him.
I mean, it's a real like, you can press that button and you can be like, wow, these dishes are not a problem anymore.
Right.
And that's what I
Yeah.
found is really the solution to just like life. There's this great quote, it's not how, but who.
Mm.
So in this case, you're their legal guardian. A tale as old as time. But luckily for them, you don't work on a farm. So there's not like endless hours of work to toil over. But,
We have a small farm.
no way, really?
Yeah, but my kids are before they used to be so helpful. We'll get the eggs every morning. Now they're like, no. But
Well,
yeah.
this isn't the farm of old. And I think that's for the better. I think honestly, having a farm and having to rely on it in like a prairie situation is like a really difficult environment to thrive in, I think. And that's just like human experience, I guess. It's been getting easier in ways, but it's also been getting a lot more complicated because now like how do I mean I guess like so the farmer who like forces their child to like work, they're going to instill in them certain values, and those values may very well help them to function and survive in this very hostile environment. But since the environment's gotten so cushy, do we really need this excessive hardening that may rob us of our ability to experience the sublime difference in scenarios that only a person with a level head could? So like when we tie this back into lead, like I'm that person for lead. Tamara has a skewed perspective from her trauma. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like having to go on the farm and like freaking out. It was like having her kids get lead poisoning, having this house that she had renovated that's now a super lead hazard, and then it burns down somehow. She doesn't collect the insurance money. I don't understand. Then her whole charity got investigated or she got investigated. She was getting
Mm-hmm.
public assistance and claiming zero income, but she was collecting like 100K a year or something, 500K over 5 years from this not-for-profit. But she was writing she made no money, but
Yeah.
she deducted the loss of her house, which I didn't know you can do, but it makes sense. But all people have insurance. I don't see how. I don't know. I'm not asking any questions. None of my business. But It is interesting. So this is a scary traumatic experience that would leave a big impression on somebody. And so
Yeah.
when I come through with the lead, I'm like, lead is fun for me. Like I made a lot of money off of lead. I sold 200,000 units of my 30 swab pack from 2019.
Yeah. Yeah.
200,000 30 packs for like $15 on Amazon. Like that was good. A good experience for me. And like I've been able to move throughout the lead research environment with like total reckless abandon, honestly, because I'm not a researcher. I'm just a random dude, and I just want to do more research and get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And then the FDA at one point told me to stop selling smelling salts, so that's why I stopped selling them. So then I really had to focus on lead. So that's really the answer to your first question, which is what got me into this so much. It's really come full circle now. But they
Yeah.
sent me this really mean letter. It was like, you can't sell this as a drug. And I was like, is it really a drug? I was like, are ice baths medical devices? That 100% meets the criteria of doing something serious to a person's body. And they didn't, they just kind of sidestepped that one. But so I'm like, I'm going to burn down this whole other industry because I can't sell smelling salts. But then I just kind of like lamented to that. And I was like, it's okay. I'll just sell them as something else now. They're not smelling salts anymore. They're cleaning supplies. You put
Right.
a
It's
damp
only
napkin over the top and the ammonia dissolves in the dampness and you have an ammoniated rag and you clean stuff. So it's now Atomic Rhino clean up in the gym instead of Atomic Rhino smelling salts. I canceled that trademark and I made a new one. This is how it works, right?
yeah, that's how it works. That's how that's how the big corporations do it.
I know. And today, anybody can be a big corporation. And it's great because I was looking at a machine just the other day, and I know this isn't the subject of this topic, but it's such a great like analogy for life. Is I saw this equipment being sold on this website called Vivor, which is a Chinese company that makes like all this equipment. It's all electrical equipment. You could do so many processes of filling jars over and over and automating. Like you can make thousands and thousands of things per hour with these machines, and they're available for a few $100. So anybody can become like the means to production that in the past would be so expensive to break into the game that now I hope to see more people take advantage of just like the wealth of like economic prosperity that's available to us by using technology. And we can
Yeah.
also use a similar kind of technology about lead. When we know about lead and we have the ability to detect it, we can protect ourselves like never before.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, but I'm gonna real quick on off a tangent. So most lead exposure is from dust, right? Is that so? Are you know how all the Stanley cups? I know you tested a bunch of
Yeah,
stainless steel water canteens. Yeah, it's covered, right? So we're not.
it's under, it's covered. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we're not exposed to it, right?
No, you're not exposed to it. This isn't exposing me to lead. Just like, I'm
Yeah,
not being exposed to knives that are in my drawer.
yeah,
But when
yeah.
the knife is sticking out of your couch cushions and you don't see it, that's when it hurts you.
Yep.
And so, like, I don't want to demonize lead. Like, I have nothing against lead. I think lead is cool. It's actually a pretty crazy chemical. I mean, it's an element, but it does a lot of stuff. Like, it can substitute for calcium if we wanted to. It can,
Yeah.
lead acid battery technology is a good technology. Like, it doesn't cause environmental contamination, really. I would love to actually randomly like to see giant lead acid batteries that have stuff that drives around inside to clean it so the battery never messes up. I don't know why the insides of batteries, like you roll them up and say, this is the battery, it will last 1,500 cycles. Like we need like a battery engine. Anyway,
Yeah.
Stanley
No,
cups don't cause exposure.
that's a good idea about the battery though. I have solar chargers for my electric fencing and it's lead battery, right? Lead acid battery. And I saw that on their website for up to 500 to 1,500 like recharging cycles. I'm like, why can't it be a lifetime if it's recharging through solar? Like, why do I have to replace it?
Because they make little whiskers of conductive material inside the battery. It short circuits, I think, over time.
Okay.
And like scale builds up and the
Yeah.
reaction doesn't proceed. But I'm really interested in flow chemistry. So I want to get into that a little bit too because I'm like so not into spending money on stuff that I think is a waste of money. And I think that spending money for heat is a total waste of money. So I got to figure out because like you generate heat waste by mining Bitcoin, for example, or you generate heat waste by doing some kind of industrial process. And that's like that heat is normally a nuisance. But like in the winter, I want heat. I want free heat. So
Yeah.
I wish that the price of Bitcoin wasn't so high. I would have bought a bunch of miners, but I did get two. So I'm gonna try to heat up my warehouse because it's freezing in here.
Yeah.
in the winter.
Maybe put some compost. Just kidding.
No, I love that. Yeah. Well, I was thinking also angrily about the leaves. Like there's so many leaves. There's so much carbon and hydrogen in those leaves. Like there's a lot of potential energy. Like why am I buying oil? I hate the oil thing on my house. Do you have oil for heat?
We have a wood stove and we have a split AC
Oh yeah,
slash heater.
like a heat pump kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Which is great. I love the heat pump idea. Moving energy around is really cool. I got to do more of that. There's so much stuff to do because I really am trying to be the nexus of like all the next lead type things. I got this XRF gun I'm gonna make. It's so crazy. I bought these like X-ray sensors. You got to cool them to negative 30 Celsius. There's literally an unlimited amount of lead research. I got these different tables where everything is. It's so crazy.
what I know that you tested a lot of salt.
Yeah,
I need to get that report.
I honestly don't think you need it. I don't think it makes any much of a difference. If you don't have
That's
pots,
fair.
I don't think that you're consuming too much salt. If you look on Tamara's
Right.
website, you'll see that it shows a percentage of like the limit or something, but that's a limit for baby food. And it was proposed. It was like found to be too unreasonable. And that's just
Yeah.
because there's like so much lead from that lead in the car gas that it's really like in the food supply permanently to
Yeah.
some degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this we would be talking about like, if we use micrograms per deciliter, like point zero something micrograms per deciliter. But this because this is like parts per billion level lead in the food. But for every kilogram of food or liter of water, which weighs a kilogram, that you consume that has 1 part per billion, you're consuming 1 microgram.
Yeah. So
So
it's not hurting you.
I don't know. No, you'd be consuming it anyway. That's the thing. Like it's
Yeah.
inescapable. So if
Right.
you increase that by 5 or 10%, it's not going to do anything. But if you have a random source of lead, like the dust in your house, the soil, the dirt, a coffee cup that has lead on the inside, plates you use every day,
Yeah.
something like that. Like you go to the shooting range, you go to an indoor shooting range. Like I shot these guns a couple weeks ago. That I was inhaling smoke from those guns. I had a lot of
Yeah.
lead. We
Yeah.
shot them into different things. I tried to make this thing where it would like shine the light and I was spraying the liquid from like a pump sprayer and shooting the gun through it. And then we got some dust deposit, but then I used this shotgun and it made so much, it started burning the liquid. It made this whole fire thing occur. It was crazy. But
Wow.
that thing was ejecting. There's lead all over your hand from it. It was a semi-automatic shotgun, so the gas comes back and like recocks it. But it
Yeah.
just made so much lead smoke go onto my hand. It was crazy. Anyway, shooting guns is not safe for lead. That's my determination. I haven't posted that
Yeah.
video yet, but because like the footage is honestly crazy, and it was at night, so the guy said we shouldn't even been shooting at night, but it was crazy. It was really fun.
I'm gonna
Guns.
be. Yeah, guns. I know. Didn't they just put out that I don't know if it was in the news, but about the hunters in somewhere in the East Coast telling them not to eat the deer that they're hunting because it's. Oh wait, never mind. It was PFAS. It wasn't lead. But still, I
Oh
would
my
just
God, there's
imagine
PFAS in the deer.
that's what they said. But
That's
I
not
would
good.
just imagine the lead would be right. Don't they say like the bullet or
Sure.
whatever travels into like their body, and then there's lead in the right? So is that one route
That's
of
how
exposure?
it can be, yeah. And it also is a problem for wounded animals that get eaten. If you leave, like, because you shoot an animal in the woods, you're probably not going to use like a bullet, like you'd shoot, like if you assassinated somebody, you use a bullet, but you just use like a shotgun, like which shoots a bunch of little pellets.
Yeah, yeah.
And so these little pellets can get lodged in an animal that survives or a person. I've seen the guy on Instagram who got shot. He had a bunch of pellets in him. Dick Cheney shot someone and riddled them with bullets. That guy probably had decent lead exposure. That guy's led the bullet guy. He got shot in his hands from his father-in-law. I don't know how the relationship was, but he had an elevated level of 14 micrograms per deciliter, which is pretty high.
Yeah,
Not as high as the average in 1978, though, which was 17.
that's high.
So we really got to think about that. Yeah, we really got to all think about that when we think about lead. But levels over 2 micrograms per deciliter or 20 ppb in adult blood increases risk of heart attack, death, and ischemic heart injury from cardiovascular edema, or not edema, sorry, like a clot. What's that thing when you get a clot in your arteries? Coronary
Um,
artery disease. That's what it's called.
yeah, yeah, something like that.
I'm not a doctor, but
I mean, I'm
I know that lead is bad for
yeah.
adults' hearts. My dad had a heart attack when he was like 45. He was playing soccer and he fell down and he was unconscious. And then they shocked him back to life. And then he had his stents put in because he had so much blockage in his arteries because
Yeah,
he had high
yeah.
cholesterol. It was eating eggs and not paying attention. So pay attention to your cholesterol. Mine's slightly elevated, but I think it's genetic. I took statins for a time, but then I got tired of taking statins. I don't know. The cardiovascular doctors are always so chill too. They're like, "Oh, don't worry about it." I'm like, "Don't worry about it? You just said that there's some degree. I have some degree of elevated cholesterol."
They
I don't
want you
understand the medical system.
they want you to be a lifetime patient.
Yeah, but how long do they want me to live for?
Right.
This guy's got thousands of patients. That's the thing. That's the thing. Certain people just aren't equipped to help other people in the ways that they may really need it. And so, what I really appreciated about this lead opportunity is that by making these fluorospec tests really fast, I can offer them to people and they can like have so much power and ability. A doctor could never give you this for your heart health, let's say. Like
Yeah.
just see exactly what, because lead exposure is like literally 100% preventable by just not being exposed to lead. Like it's not like, oh, maybe you'll get lead poisoning in your life. If there's no lead, you'll never get lead poisoning. It's like the easiest disease to avoid. And it does increase the risk of heart attack death. 400, they said 400,000 Americans die every year prematurely because of heart attacks due to lead in the 2019 Lancet published journal. I don't know if that's fake because that sounds alarming. If that's real, that's a huge problem. But that seems to overestimate lead's impact on cardiovascular mortality. But that study did follow 18,000 people for 20 years, 4,000 of whom died. And then they assessed confounding factors. But, who knows? It's not good.
Lead. Lead is one of them.
Lead
Now,
is definitely one of them, yeah. And it makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So does it kind of cost, because you know how like with calcium, if your body is not absorbing the calcium to the bones and whatnot, it goes to the tissues and it causes, I can't remember the term.
Plaque calcification.
Yeah, yeah, it causes
Yeah,
calcification.
deposition. Yeah.
So basically lead kind of does similar. Is it cause calcification
It calls
or
leadification because since lead acts like
oh
calcium.
yeah, leadification. Okay. Yeah, that's
So
the
it's
term then.
and that's a great point too because that like parts per billion lead in your blood. I don't know off the top of my head. I wish I did. How much lead in, I'm sorry, how much calcium ppb levels are in circulating in your blood?
Hmm.
I have no idea how it's transported in the blood, and I don't know what the concentration is. But the lead is transported on the red blood cells. So I don't know how it works, but it ostensibly can, and it seems to cause, coronary artery disease in adults. And I think that it has to do with probably its likely substitution for calcium in these
Hmm.
deposits, which aren't great to begin with, but
Yeah.
are likely even more inflammatory and would beget even more dysfunction of the, you know, like the walls of the, I don't even know how it works exactly to say like, oh, we're on the magic school bus and we're like flying through the inside of
Yeah.
the lead calcified arteries. But I would love to get some arteries of people who
Right.
died and like cut them open and fluorospect them and under a microscope or micro XRF scan them. There's some pretty cool technology that can take a micro photograph in X-ray and show you what the elements are in the photograph. So you
Huh.
could see a cross section of an artery and you could potentially see, let's say, suppose somebody was getting calcification for 30 years, but 10 of those years they were severely exposed through their workplace. You could potentially see like the rings of a tree, a band or a period of lead deposition, which would be just like, phenomenal. I would love to see that. That would be like the most
Yeah. I was
exquisite
like,
lead test.
I don't like to get X-rays, but I'll get an X-ray for that.
Yeah, well, just plain X-rays won't do it for you. You got to read
Oh,
the
yeah.
X-ray fluorescence, which is
Okay.
basically when the XRF, so the X-ray guns that everyone uses to detect lead, they shoot X-rays. The X-rays hit the surface. Since the X-rays have so much energy, they ionize atoms that they interact with, and so those atoms will emit X-ray light off of them. And
Okay.
the wavelength that they emit the X-ray light at is determined by the element type. So when you hit lead atoms, they vibrate and then they shoot off more X-ray light in the color that lead X-ray light is, which is like 12 kilo electron volts.
So can you do that right now with your thing? With a or no, it's like a more like
Um,
crazy equipment.
Wow. Yeah, I can do that. Oh my gosh, I'm walking around now. Ah, this is my warehouse spectrometer room area. But anyway, this is the XRF gun.
Yeah.
This can shoot X-rays in and then get a reading back, but it can't take the photo. It can just tell you
Okay.
what type of X-rays, what color X-rays are coming back. And that's thanks to a chip, which I got. These are crazy chips. I got them from a photonics company. These things will detect X-rays. These are the ones I got to cool to negative 30 Celsius. And so I can
Okay.
actually generate my own X-rays using, I wonder where my little, I don't know where it is, but I have these X-ray tubes. Oh, here's one. We're going on like a crazy tangent. But this is an X-ray tube. It uses high voltage to shoot electrons from this area over here to hit this little target right here. And then those bounce out this window, and those X-rays will hit a surface, making the surface glow in X-ray light. And then if there's lead there, this chip will pick it up, basically.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's gonna be sick. But see, this is just like the whole lead thing is crazy because the people who've been doing it have been doing it for a while, and like there's so many regulations, and everybody has their own personal experience. It may not be trauma induced, but I would argue that being a part of this society in any regard, especially a capacity that doesn't allow someone to like access unlimited money through their job, are experiencing some degree of trauma. And so I think that all these researchers are horribly enmeshed in a dysfunctional society that doesn't prioritize, I don't know, like good use of human time and instead
Yeah.
prioritizes like the selfish acquisition of resources through whatever like misguided sense of success, has been imprinted on us. It's crazy. Lead is
Yeah.
great. Lead is going to get a lot better.
Well, we're looking forward to that because I know a lot of moms nowadays, because of the other person, are so scared of lead. And I'm like, dude, there's lead in the fruit or the vegetables you're eating that's grown on the ground because lead is in the earth, basically. Like,
Now,
yeah, now.
it still isn't natural though. The natural amount of
Yeah.
lead on the surface was like zero because lead
Okay.
naturally will form insoluble, normally sulfur compounds. So lead sulfide is like insoluble. It's never, you could eat it probably and it wouldn't even affect you
Yeah.
because the sulfuric acid is stronger than hydrochloric acid. And we have HCl in our stomach and the whatever. So this is how lead, we've been digging it up for years. So from a practical standpoint, like, yes, who cares? Like it's just a fact of life at this point, and we're lucky that it's not worse. Because
Yeah.
20 years ago, when I was born in 1992, I was definitely exposed to way more lead than that. I don't know what my blood level was, but it was, the average was pretty high. So
Yeah.
I know that my mom tested for lead in the house, but like I definitely like to make dust. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. There's mad
Yeah.
exposure routes today. So in 1992, it was really like this place is a straight up Wild West. Thank God we didn't have like an Amazon or an eBay in 1992 because like you would have had such an influx of like lawn darts and like unsafe products
Yeah.
that it would have been a real fiasco. And people think it's unsafe today, but it's never been safer. It's never been a safer time for everything but like PFOAs. Like BPA used to be in all plastics pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely chewed on a lot of plastic as a kid. I would love to chew on it.
No, every kid chooses plastic to chew on over the wooden toys you get them.
Of
That's my
course,
experience
yeah.
with my kids.
I would want to chew on wood. Plastic is great. Then it turns white and you fully deform the cap and then you just like it was disgusting. But like kids chew on stuff, I guess. I would always chew on those caps in school. I would literally eat them. It was like the guy with the cigar, like that one American president. Harry Truman. He would always be smoking. I don't know, World War II. Like no, he was from England, the English guy, the general. I don't know his name. I forgot his name, but it was hilarious though. I don't know why. I was like, I just like to chew on stuff, I guess.
All right. Well,
But yeah.
okay. You talked about PFAS, and
Mhm.
I saw one of your posts where you're saying that lead PFAS has a shorter half-life than lead. Let's talk about that.
Semi-true. I mean, it does in certain respects. There's a lot of PFAS is like there's so many different fluorinated chemicals that are
Yeah.
possible, basically. And some of them are dangerous, some of them are very inert, some of them will, though, cause like cancer through various mechanisms. So, like, some of them last for a really long time, some of them don't. And the ones that don't last for a long time are typically more dangerous because it's kind of like radiation. And the thing gets used up, the energy goes away. So, like, when a radioactive isotope is like releasing gamma rays, like now it's like less dangerous after it's released the rays. So, I don't know. I think it has to do a lot with how much you're exposed to over a long time, and it's really the same is true with lead. Like it's going to build up if you have, and same with BPA's apparently. So I got to
Yeah.
like go on a diet or something because I've been consuming them. But in terms of PF, like fluorine compound consumption,
Yeah.
I don't know. So it depends on which one you're specifically exposed to, and it depends on your exposure route. But it's like crazy branding to call them forever chemicals because
Yeah.
I mean they're like close to forever chemicals, but like lead is actually forever.
Yeah.
Like you don't get rid of elemental lead at all.
Right.
And it normally will stay in a form, if it's been deposited in the environment, it will stay in a form that's still soluble in human stomach acid unless it's treated with either sulfuric acid or phosphoric acid. Or you could argue like hydrofluoric acid too, but that would be more dangerous because all those are insoluble in stomach acid. But we've put it into forms lead carbonate, that's super soluble in stomach acid, that's white lead paint, or lead oxide, which is normally the other one you find, is they'll break down in our stomach acid. So it's just kind of waiting. But that's why you can neutralize it with TSP.
Yeah. Send me a link for that where we can buy that. Can we buy it as a
It's you
general public consumer?
yeah, it's ubiquitous. Actually, this is low key crazy. The EPA banned it. It used to be the number one laundry detergent and dishwashing detergent.
Yeah.
And everyone who uses it loves it because it's so good. I've used it actually. It's so good at cleaning stuff. You know, sodium carbonate, they call it caustic washing soda. You
Yeah.
ever hear of that?
Yeah.
So it's like that, but it's phosphorus instead of
Okay.
the carbonate or whatever. Sodium, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, whatever it is. It's insane. But it basically was polluting the waterways with phosphates,
Uh-huh.
which are like nitrites.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you'll get algae blooms if everybody's washing their clothes in phosphorus and they're just flushing massive amounts. So they got rid of it, but it really was the best. So it's illegal to sell it for use in dishwashers or whatever now, but you can buy it just for general cleaning and it works amazing for lead. It really enhances your cleaning because anything left behind is now not going to dissolve in your stomach acid. And I've done some tests where I wasn't able to dissolve it into solution. So it seems to work very well for that. So I'm a big fan of that. And it's ubiquitous. You can buy it on Amazon. It's so cheap too. I was like thinking about selling it, but I'm like, how do I sell this? It's like almost like free. Like 1 pound of it is $7. And
Yeah.
that will make
Yeah.
20 gallons of liquid.
Yeah.
So it's a great low cost thing. And I would definitely pick anybody watching this, I would definitely pick this up just to have around the house to clean stuff with because it's a nice mild detergent. It'll make your hands feel slightly soapy, but that's just because it's saponifying all the grease on your hands. So that's how you clean stuff.
So can we, let's say, I typically avoid things that are glazed, with a glaze because that's usually has lead and cadmium. So let's say someone has a favorite mug, it's glazed. Can they use that to clean it, and then will that make the lead insoluble when they're drinking the coffee and all that stuff?
I love the question because I tried this yesterday and the results were semi puzzling. It seemed to help.
Okay.
but it wasn't 100%. And then I did something where I dried it out in the oven, and then there was all these crystals growing out of the cracks, the micro cracks. I soaked it in very hot TSP for a very long time, and there was these like micro cracks, and I guess the TSP went inside, and then like so it was just it just looked crazy. So I don't know if that would happen to somebody's dish, but it did seem to decrease the amount of lead that came off when I wiped it with the swab.
Okay.
So I don't want to say it's going to make it safe though, because TSP doesn't penetrate. Like it's not
Okay.
going to dissolve and etch away. It's going to form a like an insoluble surface, but then
Uh-huh.
like maybe the surface tension or something doesn't allow it to really get in there. Acids will penetrate though. They'll get in there and then they'll start dissolving more and they'll, you know, I don't think it's 100% on a dish, but I think it's
Yeah.
100% on your paint and your probably your soil too. And typically
Okay.
people just bury the soil or they remove it, which costs a fortune. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do an experiment at that lady's house from Maine and see, how we can turn her like hazardous waste yard into safe yard.
Okay.
It's all over the place. And just crazy too, because we went behind a bush and they didn't spray back there because they were being lazy. It's so forensic. We could see exactly what they did 20 years ago where they put this stuff and where they
Yeah.
didn't by spraying it because it just glows like a so bright
Yeah. Yeah.
color. And that glowing is really phenomenal for detecting lead. So that's why I'm so empowered by it. Like it's such a good technique. It gets so much glowing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's just
So
great to see.
if we get those tests, what should we just test everything and see if, like, would lead be in almost everything, especially if it's painted surfaces, you think? Or
Mm,
like,
maybe, yeah. Painting surfaces could be like potentially always have lead, but
yeah,
probably not if they're much newer things won't have it. Plastic won't have it unless it's older
yeah.
plastic. Rubber might have it. Fibers, I don't know. I've
Yeah,
scanned some
probably
stuff
from the
and did.
dyes, right? Like the
Maybe, yeah, but like I don't know. It's like it's not common though, basically. I
okay.
would test like the main things, which is your house, your deck, anything that you're gonna make dust with, anything you're eating off of, surfaces on
Yeah.
dishes, inside of mugs, especially. And if you got a hobby that does lead, like shooting, like diving, like fishing, ottering, there's gotta be one more. I'll just say shooting
Well,
again, because guns are so dangerous with lead.
how about welding? Do
Welding could be,
welding or
yeah,
no?
but I'm not going to tell you you're going to get 100% accurate results using fluorospec on metals. If you're trying to like evaluate
Okay.
the amount of lead in the metal, if you're about to vaporize some of it,
Yeah.
lead in metal is like in the metal, and the metal doesn't like come off. If you could imagine like I don't know, like a churro, and then a piece of metal. If you rub the outside of the churro, like stuff's coming off. If you rub the outside
Yeah.
of the metal,
Yeah.
like I'm not going to sit here and tell you nothing came off, but I'm also
Yeah.
not going to be able to tell you how much came off or point to it because it's too small. So when you have lead that's like 1,000 parts per million, that's still not very much. That's like a tenth of a percent. So it's not a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But lead is dangerous. So when you have a heavy piece of metal, you say, oh, it's X parts per million, but like that number still isn't necessarily 100% relevant to our health until we like find out how much is coming off and maybe which form it's in.
How much you're exposed to, like, each and every
Over
day.
time, yeah, no, you're right on the
Yeah.
money. It's like
Yeah.
it's such a complicated topic that the soundbite that it normally gets in people's lives isn't that good. And so I'm kind of just trying to provide, not that I've really been doing this lately, but like trying to provide a window into this topic that is watchable at least, and hopefully is
Yeah.
entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's,
We get
but
sorry,
there's,
go ahead.
so, no, I was gonna say literally nothing of importance.
Do we get exposed to lead from our phones in laptops and stuff, or not
Um,
really? Or
I don't think so. If you look on, Apple doesn't have any kind of like markings on outside of their phones anymore. But I don't even know if that's legal, honestly. But when you look at a piece of electronics, it'll say ROHS on it. It'll be kind of
okay.
sometimes funnily capitalized. But this, I don't honestly know what it stands for, but it's some European regulation that has to do with not putting toxic elements into electronics or consumer products
Okay.
even if it's not accessible. The United States has a thing about accessible components, but this ROHS is for interior components because they are thinking about the recycling.
Yeah.
So, a lot of electronics have lead, older ones
Mm-hmm.
especially.
Yeah.
Lead solder is a great solder, apparently. So newer ones, we're not going to be exposed to this. But, if you crack it open, I'm sure there's going to be lithium and other things that maybe are more crazy to contend with. But recycling electronics in your backyard could expose you to lead. I don't think that you're going to get exposed from, casual, like, you know, you like to smell the
Recycle.
electronics, doing whatever. You ever do that as a kid? You smell the remote?
No.
No? Oh
But
my God, it's the best.
what I used to do was growing up in the Philippines, my mom owned a gas station, and I would always stay on the island where the cashiers are, and I would just inhale the fumes.
Of
I
the
know, it's
gasoline.
terrible. Yeah.
That
I'm
is
like, oh,
terrible.
I'm full of lead.
No, yeah, I think that you would have done better
Yeah.
on smelling the remotes because this electronic smell, it was like one of my favorite smells.
That is
Anyway,
so weird.
I gotta find one. I gotta find one soon. But
I'm that's so funny. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask real quick. So basically, are basically all chocolates contaminated with lead because of how it's transported? Like how in other countries, do they still use leaded gasoline, or is it just already in their ground?
um, I love how you're so on this topic. I mean, you have one of the most like well-rounded and contemporary perspectives on this so far.
Thank you.
It's very close. It's not that all countries have banned lead gas. This is a big thing, and I don't remember what year they achieved this in like the mid to early 2000s,
Okay.
banning lead gas everywhere. It's just, I think it's the soil. I think it's the processing because the beans themselves have like virtually no lead when they get taken off the trees. But
Okay.
apparently, and I may not be right on this, but apparently they lay them out on like cloths or something to dry in the sun, and that's when the dust comes onto them.
Okay.
That's what I think. But honestly, I don't know. And you know, you got to do isotope analysis on that. And that's probably the last thing on lead that I could tell you about, which is that lead has a mix of different weights of the same atom. So they have an extra proton, some of them, or an extra couple of protons. And so these are isotopes. So it's the same element, has the same properties virtually, but it's a different isotope. And so lead from different sources will have different mixtures of isotopes. And so if I have a lead source from a mine in the United States and I compare that from a lead mine in China, they're probably going to have different isotope ratios. So if a person was poisoned with this lead and then I got a sample of it and I gave it to my friend who does this, but I don't do this. You need a really expensive, crazy machine to split the beams and then mass spectrometer, the different weights of the same element. Really insane, expensive equipment. And you need to really be good at doing this analysis, which I am not good at doing that kind of trace analysis like this guy is. Anyway, you can find out the source of the lead. And so
Okay.
in order to determine the lead in the chocolate source, we could take the soil and then we could take a chocolate bar. And then we could, are these the similar ones? We could maybe even do chemical species analysis on the chocolate bar, but that would be a lot more hard and probably
Yeah.
unlikely unless the chocolate was really highly contaminated. But you can sometimes with the XRF, you can read the parts per million of different elements, and then you can determine if they're in a stoichiometric ratio, which would indicate what kind of compound they are. So like salt, like NaCl, it's one sodium and one chlorine go together. So if you knew the parts per million concentration of all the sodium ions and the chlorine ions in a solution or a mixture or whatever, you're XRFing this. Not that you would normally XRF, those are too light really to XRF. But lead and chromium, let's say, for example, you could see that there's lead chromate in this cinnamon, for example, which isn't accidentally contaminated, but is more typically intentionally adulterated. And this gentleman I'm referring to actually did do some sleuthing on that and determined that this was coming from a source that was like a pigment. And
Okay.
so people were intentionally putting lead into the cinnamon that was sold to those
Yeah.
Wanna Banana consumers. I actually also met the guy who found that out. He was just a lead inspector in Ohio. It was sick. I don't know if it was Ohio. So it was in Georgia, maybe. I don't remember. It was at a conference. But he was very like cool about it. I should have gotten some photos. I should have got him on Instagram. But I didn't want to like honestly, when I go to these conferences, I don't act crazy at all because I'm
You
like,
should.
yeah, but the people there are like really like lead
Yeah.
concerned people and professionals though. And I'm over
Yeah.
here like I don't have any credentials. The only thing the government's acknowledged my existence on is like not selling smelling salts anymore. So like I try to just play cool and I just offer support and I just tell them about what the deal is,
Yeah.
encourage them to like to want to just test and help, help their programs out, saving money and stuff, but whatever, I don't know. It's the isotope analysis is crazy and that's like the last edge of this whole thing. Because then you can fingerprint the lead, you can track down where it came from. You may be able to also use another method to track down what form it's in, and that would tell you where it came from potentially. But
Yeah.
I love the transportation angle on the lead contaminated chocolate. I think it's ridiculous that whole Lindt chocolate thing. Like they're getting sued or something.
Yeah.
Their Lindt chocolate has so much lead. They say, well, we didn't say it didn't have lead. Like
Right.
there's
It's
just
not like we claimed we didn't advertise it as lead free.
that's a such. I mean, but that's like honestly a genuinely valid defense against a lawsuit. Like
Yeah.
if you sell a fork and the person jams it in their eyeball. And that's not the same thing, but I'm saying there's an inherent risk to a fork, and there may be found to be a generally inherent risk to chocolates
Yeah. Yeah.
that's like not legislated against. And if they were following the California Proposition 65 warning, which says if you get more than half a microgram of lead for the maximum daily serving of the
Yeah.
thing, then you have to put a warning on it if your company has more than 10 employees. So no one even really needs I could sell something in California that's like a straight piece of lead, and I don't need to put a California Prop 65 warning on it because my
Yeah.
company's not big enough.
Yeah.
So these
Yeah.
even the best regulation ever that people are like, oh, California Prop 65 has gone too far. It means it only gives cancer in California. Okay, great. I love that opinion, I guess, for being skeptical of things that seem like they're overreaching. But it doesn't even overreach that far in certain respects. It's completely spineless and is nonsensical regulation.
Yeah.
It's so stupid too. I honestly think they should give bigger bounties to people like me who are report companies that sell stuff. I can only get $500 per report. It's the lawyers that really made out on that. I honestly think that lawyers groups lobbied for that law
Yeah.
because there's $30 million a year goes to these lawsuits and like 95% of that goes to law firms. So who's making out on this? Not the government, not California government. It's just the
Yeah.
lawyers.
Exactly. I know a lot of laws are like the lawyers making the money, really.
And you know what Shakespeare says about the lawyers?
Tell me.
I don't want to say, but Shakespeare said the first thing we have to do is kill all the lawyers. So he said that, not me. And he was killed. So I think that maybe the lawyers have power that we don't know about.
Yeah.
He's not around anymore.
You better keep your mouth shut. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
But it's a shame though. There's no lead, there's no number one lead solution in the
Yeah.
world other than detectla.com/me/floralspec. And that's what I'm really trying to do is to give people like the one-stop shop to just get your head on straight about this situation, identify it, figure out where it could be, figure out how you can get away from it, how bad it's going to actually be, and maybe how you can get out of your body are things TBD. And a lot of this stuff, as you can see, is well underway in its construction, but is not fully finished or whatever.
It's almost there as long as he doesn't keep hurting his tailbone.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That hurt. I'll post a video about it, but it's like that was crazy. It was honestly the craziest thing. I really was seeing and hearing things that weren't there, and my body felt fuzzy.
You have
It's
to
like testing
share.
for dying.
Yeah.
Like I tested the afterlife. I didn't actually die, and that's how you get lead exposure. You either test for lead or you actually get exposed. It's like testing for landmines. Would you just walk around and be like, "Oh, I think I found one. I'm missing my leg." No, you
Yeah.
just, put like a machine with the chains, or the rats, right? The explosive finding rats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love those little guys. Don't test with it for your kids. That's like the whole thing. I actually was recently, this is the last thing, I swear. I was having a good time, so I just want to keep
No
talking.
worries.
I was visiting with somebody and we made this video featuring her baby where I use the baby to like test for lead. And I read this like made up pamphlet that's like how to use your child to test for lead. And it's like, and I'm reading it. I'm like, so let the child wander around. I'm like, what? I'm like, how do you use this? And I'm like, wait, I'm like, hold on. It just says that we're testing the child's blood for lead, but lead is bad for babies. It's like, why are we waiting for them to get it in their bodies to test for it? This is
Yeah,
so
yeah,
insane to me. But like, in everyone's defense, fluorspec didn't exist. It wasn't like, oh, you can casually just know where all lead is and lead dust and have a full understanding of this topic just by getting fluorspec. Like it's so easy,
yeah,
but it didn't previously exist. So that's why I don't act crazy and I try to just give away. I just giving away fluorspec to the government people. I said, hey, if you have a good idea, I'll give you 100 tests. Just go for it. Figure out
yeah.
what you could do, how you could get disease in people's hands. Now I'm focusing on targeting pregnant women,
Hmm.
which if you heard that in the non sequitur in the news, you'd be like, whoa, that doesn't sound good. He's targeting pregnant women. But anyway, by targeting them, I can ensure that they get a free lead test before their child ever steps foot in the house.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
ideal. That prevents lead poisoning. I swear, those people's parents, they better not be getting lead poisoning. They should be getting automatically revoked of their parenting if that kid gets lead poisoning because they got the test. They can't get it.
yeah, yeah. But so would you advocate for testing the baby's blood basically like kind of like once they're born
That's
just to make sure
that's
or
that's a great idea. I'm not against testing kids, but I'm against testing kids in lieu of testing the environment when you can just do
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
You know, like you could say, well, you could test the environment when the person's trying to conceive.
yeah,
Or when they're in their first six, or when if you go to any obstetrician, they take any blood from the parent, they should test the parent for lead because that's where the lead
yeah.
exposure
It
would
gets
happen
passed on,
in the
right?
womb. Yeah, and it the blood is like virtually mixing, kind of.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah,
probably a pretty decent amount of transference of toxins from the mom to the baby. You
yeah.
wouldn't
There
want
is
lead to be part of that,
100%.
but like you could also say that the brain is not the bones. And so in utero, blood lead exposure probably is primarily sequestered into bones,
Yeah,
but also brain, but also I don't know. There's so much to speculate about lead. I can't help it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Who knows? But that ongoing exposure is going to cause a lot of problems, especially when so like like kids' brains are so active, but they can't do anything. You're like, hey, work on this farm, and they're like, no. And then say something you've never heard of before. Like they got so much energy, they're so rambunctious, they're so full of life, but they're not very efficient at doing jobs. So we prune a lot of those neurological connections as we mature, and then we're able to optimize for like a function that involves prolonged concentration and
hmm,
not eating candy for breakfast. Although I'm still learning that one apparently. What does that say? I don't know. But I'm not saying that I had an optimized pruning of my neural networks. Definitely not claiming that. So, in the terms of getting a lead exposure over time when you're growing up, you won't be able to prune these neural networks very well because they're so activated generally. And so, since those calcium gated ion channels are affected by the lead and they're just left on, the brain doesn't know, like, okay, we got to ignore all those neurons. They're just chatter. But so the pruning doesn't happen as efficiently, and this translates to the kind of ADHD, ADD symptoms that you
okay.
see in people affected by lead. I don't even know how I got on that one, but
I'm gonna have I'm gonna have to. I've never tested my kids' blood levels for lead. I have four. I'm on my fifth. On to number five next year. But
working on it already.
oh no, yeah, it's already baking.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So
Yeah.
you're onto it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna. I did test our old house before for lead with the leads the red ones that
Lead check. Yeah.
yeah, the lead check. And yeah, we were renting a house that was like built in 1949. It
Okay.
still had the single pane windows, like all the
Mm.
things. So yeah, those windows, the panes that had lead and whatnot. But there were even some toys, like the painted wooden toys, had lead
Wow.
in them. Yeah, yeah.
Were those your own childhood toys? or you'd
No,
gotten
not
them?
mine. Yeah,
Okay.
I bought them. I was born and raised in the Philippines. I don't have anything that I grew up with here now.
I would imagine you wouldn't bring like boxes of junk, not
No.
junk, but like, virtually junk a lot of the times.
I brought like a one check-in luggage because I no one
Well,
carry-on luggage because I'm like I'm gonna buy all new things when I get there.
well, that's another source of exposure is people bring stuff from other countries, especially
Oh
countries
yeah,
in the Middle East. Apparently, they have like a lot of lead contaminated cookware. I would also advocate against using any raw aluminum cookware.
yeah, no,
Lead contamination in aluminum is pretty common, and
okay,
the lead forms these little spheres. And so there's like pockets of lead in the aluminum. And so when those get exposed to the surface, they'll get eaten out by your acidic,
yeah,
like tomato sauce.
yeah,
If you're
yeah,
cooking tomato sauce for a while or something like that, it will kind of go into that and then you'll get exposure. Pressure cookers too. Cook County in Washington State did this whole thing actually. They actually got Washington State to ban any cookware that has more lead than 5 parts per million, which is like an insane regulation in my opinion.
yeah,
I think it's so crazy, knee-jerk reaction to some research study that found high levels of lead, but they're all doing this research on these dishes from like developing countries that are like not dishes that people in America would use probably because they're just like,
yeah,
what is that? This is like you're
yeah,
eating out of metal. Like it's going to give you metal exposure
yeah.
and taste bad probably. So yeah, use like a cast iron or I don't know,
Steel.
Teflon pans. I think if you use Teflon pans, you don't heat them up too much. They're not releasing. They're not releasing
Yeah, they're not
PFOAs
releasing.
unless you
Yeah,
overheat them. But if
yeah,
you
but a
if
lot.
you burn them up,
Yeah,
they will release.
and a lot of times, like people kind of don't want to spend on a new pan if there's tiny scratches, and that's also releasing the PFAS, right? So just stick with cast iron
No,
and
I don't.
stainless
I don't
steel.
think so. I don't
No?
think it releases it. Like if it gets scratched, because the chemical is inert under most circumstances. But when you heat it up, eventually
The
it will
heat.
decompose, and that's
Okay.
when it will
Okay.
release like hydrofluoric acid gas and fluorinated breakdown products that could be dangerous. Like. But the thing is, like, when did Teflon come out? People were spraying their houses with Scotch Guard. That was
Yeah.
very dangerous.
Yeah.
Like that was like
Yeah.
loose, like not even fully formed PTFE. It was like fluorinated hydrocarbons or carbons, fluorine and carbon mixing together. It's slippery.
I
So
still
you
use
have
that.
non-stick. They must have reformulated it, but that was really like one of the worst products, and that caused a lot of people to be heavily exposed in the 90s to that stuff. But
Yeah.
nobody even could detect it because the level of runoff is in the parts per trillion,
Okay.
which is 1,000 times less than a parts per billion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's 1,000 times less than a part per million, and that's tiny as we know. The 1,000 ppm is a tenth of a percent. So of composition of mass. So these things are so like I don't know. I'm not even convinced of half the stuff that goes on at any time anyway. So it's never
Okay.
been better though.
I was like, now you're discrediting the non-toxic community with the PFAS on the pants.
I'm just saying I love the non-toxic community, but I think that everybody should acknowledge how they got interested in the topic and then perhaps look to that as their greatest source of weakness in creating a idea about the topic that's going to be coherent in light of all the facts. And
Yeah.
so, I am so guilty of biases in my own life on subject matter that I'm like, oh yeah, I just don't want this to be true. Just deny that addiction is a thing, you know.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
like works for a while in high school, but it's reality. So, with this toxin stuff, you can barely detect it. So it's hard to detect, it's hard to really understand, and it's scary. And nobody wants to hear about these toxins and things that could cause cancer or might cause cancer, or what do these studies even mean? What's a
Yeah.
A1 or a group 1 carcinogen versus a group B carcinogen or a group 2 or whatever it is. It's like there's most of the time though, I will say this, there's probably a bigger fish to fry that's easier than avoiding some of these really trace toxins.
Yeah.
So, lead, you may be exposed to lead, but you may have other problems.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen people smoking cigarettes. Where do they get off doing that?
They also get lead from smoking cigarettes and
I don't want
cannabis.
to talk about that because I haven't looked into that enough, and that's a really really crazy one because it would just be a fun video to make, I think. because smoking is like such an insane thing. I swear though, the level of lead in cigarettes, I don't even think that that's a problem. Like you're smoking a cigarette, you got way bigger problems. It's like
But
saying
what if?
someone's in war, like they got lead exposure. Like, all right, they might also get
Yeah,
shot.
yeah. No, but what if they're smoking every like a couple packs a day every single day? Like, wouldn't that like
Die
compound?
from other things. I don't know. You're right. They would, but like, yeah, you would get a lot more lead, but you would get like 3 times as much tar. And you're
Yeah.
like, every year you do that is another. But they measure cigarette exposure in pack years, not
Okay.
like packs. So that a pack year is smoking a pack a day for a year. And the guidelines right now for getting a chest CT is 10 pack years.
Okay.
So it almost makes it seem like it's safe. Because seems like a lot of cigarettes. To a person who doesn't smoke cigarettes, really?
Yeah. That
One
sounds
pack of cigarettes would be like, oh my gosh,
right.
how could you get addicted after smoking a whole pack? Like imagine you like smoke one, you're like, you know what I really need to convince me is smoking a whole pack of these. Like I feel like that would turn you off
I tried to
because they're
smoke
so
one
disgusting.
back in the like when I was 16, and I was like, "What the heck is this?" Never again.
Never again, yeah. It did almost kill me though with that same fake NDE experience because I overdid it and I had to lay down. I didn't pass out, but I felt like I could have because I smoked way too much of cigarette. I was like, whoa, this is not feeling normal to me. I feel
Yeah.
sick. It was more sick. This one that I had the other day, if I banged my tailbone, I didn't feel sick. I feel a little nauseous,
Yeah.
but that's just because everything was so distorted. But the nicotine made me feel so sick, so I wouldn't recommend nicotine
Yeah. Well, I
when you can
know
just
that
bang your tailbone.
they say that nicotine just by itself has therapeutic benefits, right? But not the
Yeah,
cigarettes.
yeah, but like also like
That's a different
Adderall,
topic.
amphetamines have therapeutic benefits in some regards. But like I
Okay.
don't know if I had an amphetamine that I could smoke and that would last like 10 minutes, that would be called crack. So
Yeah.
nicotine is also so addictive. I also don't think it's for me it's not a good thing, even though like oh there's some purported benefits. Because next thing you know, I wind up overdosing on it because I just start taking more of it
Yeah.
in a rush, and then I feel sick. So I can't be trusted with a vape
Yeah.
because I'll consume too much. The last time I did when I was playing golf, and I'm like I can't even golf. I feel so sick. This thing is terrible, and like I still smoked it again after that. So nicotine is a no for me for that regard. But yeah, it's interesting. Um, I wish there was a nicotine like paint. You could paint it on your skin. That would be the most pleasant way to take it.
They have patches.
Yeah, but I want a patch the size of my whole arm that I can take on and pull off, because then you don't have to stick something in your mouth. You don't have to smoke something. You can have a nice like 35-minute experience without all the fuss and like the drama of like consuming the nicotine, which is like you said, there's lead. There's no lead in the vapes, but vaping is also toxic for other reasons, and it's too easy to just redose it. So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna have to have you back on next time so
I
we can
Yeah, let's
talk
let's get
more.
into these. What was it? The different like detoxes. Okay, can we do that
Yeah,
around like
yeah,
Christmas, New Year's area, like maybe February, honestly, when I actually get the stuff, because that will be
yeah.
a
Let's
really great expose on that.
okay. Let's do it in February because I only have 2 weeks of recording in December because it's busy for my kids.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for joining me today, and he'll be back in
Yeah, and thank
February.
you so much. Yeah, I've had such a great time. This is the best podcast I've been on so far.
Oh,
So
thank
thanks
you.
for making it so fun. And I swear this is the most informative one too. Not knocking anyone else's podcast, but I think it was just, a good lead chemistry discussion.
Awesome.
Anyway,
Thank you.
yeah,
Have a good one.
you too. All right, bye for now.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please click the subscribe button, share it with others, post about it in social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or suggest topics, you can follow me on Instagram at Fatima Pagtakan or at The Wellness Rebel Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.